Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Green Program's TGP Talks. We're going to wait just a few minutes for people to come online and join the talk. So just hold tight for a little bit. We'll wait for just a few more minutes to see if any last-minute stragglers are coming on, and then we can get rolling. So thanks for joining. You'll get comfortable on the screen and the chat bar on the side to just write in who you are, where you're coming from, as well as any questions that you have about our talk and TGP or 33 buckets. We're really looking forward to this call and just talking a little bit more about reimagining impactful travel. So we'll give it a few more minutes and see if anybody is coming through. But yeah, so excuse a little bit of lag here. Thanks for joining. Hope everyone's having a great day wherever you are in the world. And we'll get started soon. Okay, I think we'll just get started now. Welcome again to the Green Program's TGP Talks. So throughout this fall, we'll be hosting a new YouTube live series consisting of 30-minute to an hour TGP Talks with special guests covering topics from impactful travel to sustainability in academia to landing your dream job and much more. My name is Lauren Hamilton, and I am the Student Success Coordinator here at the Green Program. We also have our Director of Content Strategy, Caitlin Cowan, behind the scenes answering your questions on the chat bar. So please feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us where you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you. Caitlin will be gathering questions throughout the session for a big Q&A at the end. So feel free to write them in and we'll get started on this TGP talk. So for those of you who are new to the Green Program, we provide career accelerating education abroad programs for students and young professionals to learn about our world's most pressing challenges in sustainable development. Our short-term programs align directly with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and run in Peru, Iceland, and Japan in the winter, spring, and summer breaks. Each program focuses on a different element of sustainability. So in Peru, we focus on water resource management and sustainable practices. In Iceland, we focus on renewable energy and sustainability. And in Japan, we focus on disaster mitigation and nuclear to renewable transitions. So today, we're sitting down with Paul Strong, the Executive Director of the Clean Water Champions 33 Buckets, to discuss the idea of Voluntourism and their mission to partner with communities to launch clean water franchises to establish sustainable impacts in the communities that they're working in. So Voluntourism, to give a little background, is a subset of tourism that attracts people searching for impactful and purposeful travel experiences in support of local communities. The issue that lies within this $173 billion industry is that a lot of times these companies more focus on the volunteer experience rather than the impact on the communities and the lasting impact on communities. So in this talk, we wanted to talk about, what is voluntourism, what are the positive and negative impacts of the industry, how to ensure that your service to a community lasts beyond your stay, where to go, why, and how, and some of TGP travel impacts as well. So first I'd like to introduce Paul. So welcome, Paul, to the TGP Talks, and thanks so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and a little bit more about 33 Buckets?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so as Lauren said, I'm Paul Strong. I'm the co-founder and executive director of 33 Buckets. Yeah, just to give a little background on 33 Buckets and on myself. So I went to college. I started college in 2009 at Arizona State University. And I really wanted to, make a difference in the world. Probably, I can identify with a lot of you who are kind of on that journey today. And didn't really know how to do that or what that would look like. So I sort of just joined, an engineering program because kind of was good at math, liked playing with Legos as a kid and all that. So sort of, went to college, started my classes. And then one day I actually heard about this program called Engineering Projects and Community Service. And that's what that is kind of it's a service learning class at Arizona State where you can join a real world project for a partner somewhere who's working to, resolve a social issue or environmental issue kind of in their community. And really what this program does is it gives students a chance to, use their skills to really impact, a real issue, to really make a difference, before they graduate. So it's like the idea is you don't have to wait until you're out of school and in a job, to really make a difference. So I joined that program, got involved in a project to provide safe drinking water to a girls' high school in rural Bangladesh. We actually had a community partner who was from that village. He had founded the school himself. A really interesting guy. He was actually a veteran of their War for Independence in 1971. And he now lives in Phoenix, runs a business, and is an ASU alum. So we worked with him kind of over the next few years to really work on a solution. And during that time, we learned a lot about, how to really go from just providing a short-term solution to something that really is a long-term development solution where you're, not just providing, say, a Band-Aid, for example, but you're really growing the community's capacity to address an issue that they're facing long term. So kind of from there, we completed that project. It took us a lot longer than we thought. We thought we'd be done in maybe a year tops, maybe 2 years. It actually took us over 4 years because we kind of had to reassess and restart a number of times through that process. But we got that done. We traveled to Bangladesh at the end of 2014 and finished the project in January 2015. And kind of from there, we were all really impacted by seeing the results of that. And I personally wanted to do that more. So a few of us who had graduated and from ASU and were staying in Phoenix actually launched it into a nonprofit organization. And from there, that was when we actually got connected with the Green Program and brought our work to Peru. And since then, we've been focusing on Peru and really looking to grow there and really develop our models and learn more about how we can both have a solution that's both scalable but also is adaptable and really uses the capacity of every community that we work with.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Paul, for providing a little bit of that background. And I know that we'll get a little bit deeper into, what your guys' model is and what's going on in Peru and, that transition from working, in Bangladesh to Peru, as well as any other communities that you're looking to, bring 33 buckets to. So before we get into that, could you maybe provide a little bit of your, how you would describe voluntourism and, what that industry might mean to you?
Sure. Yeah. So to me, voluntourism really is a way for people who are traveling in another country, another culture. It's a way for people to give back in one sense, like to help a community, use their talents and skills to help with an issue faced by a local community. And I think it's also meant to be a way where we can connect more with the culture that we're traveling in. So instead of just seeing kind of the usual tourist itinerary, like for example in Peru, going to Machu Picchu, you can kind of get outside that and really see more of the real country and understand people's real lives behind that.
And maybe do you see some like pros and cons with this industry, and how do you really see 33 buckets fitting in within that landscape?
Sure. Yeah. So I think first off, we see how fast voluntourism is growing. I found a stat here, just was looking some things up before this. And in the context of like short-term mission trips, so that's kind of the equivalent of voluntourism more in the context of, say, a church, for example. But it's very similar. And in that context, we had the stat says it's amazing. In 1989, we had 120,000 people participate in that kind of travel. In 2006, it was over 2 million people. So it's over 10, 15 times as many. And I'm sure nowadays it's continued to grow like that. And I think like some of the pros is that kind of in today's culture, I think it's so commercialized in a sense. And in some ways, even with the technology that we have, social media, the internet, and so on, and it's also been found by studies that, people sometimes feel actually more isolated than before. So I think kind of with those issues, I think there's kind of a growing desire really to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, and do something that's really giving back to others. So I think voluntourism kind of gives that opportunity. And kind of as I said, it's a way to, also when you're traveling, kind of get outside just the tourist attractions and really see more of, the real Peru or the real wherever you're going. So I think that's some of the pros, and also it just helps us learn more about others. Develop kind of that more of that global mindset, see how other people live differently than us. I think. Really, when you're talking about if it's a positive or a negative, I think it can be both. And I think that really depends on how the mindset that it's approached with. One thing with, voluntourism, with any kind of relief or any kind of development work, actually that relief and development are very different things. So when I say relief, I'm talking about, say, if you have a natural disaster, for example, for example, like say in Puerto Rico, when I believe it was Hurricane Maria was the name, but when the hurricane went through, and really devastated a lot of their infrastructure, there, for example, there was a need for just, short-term relief efforts, which is providing, basic necessities, water and food, while, local services are not available for that time. But with voluntourism, a lot of times we're not necessarily talking about that kind of effort. We're working somewhere that hasn't necessarily been impacted by a kind of temporary disaster like that, and that requires a different approach. We want to really be focusing on building people's capacity, really, and it should be taken with a long-term view. So we're really making sure that we're helping people live better lives in the long run. And I think sometimes when we're doing this kind of volunteer work, sometimes groups don't take that appropriate approach, and they use more of a short-term relief approach when they should really be looking more long-term. So there's a few issues with that. First off, what you're doing might not necessarily be sustainable, in the long run. Say you're, for example, giving out water filtration systems, but not necessarily training people in how to maintain a system, or giving them the means to, pay for replacement parts and so on. That might be fine if you're doing hurricane relief. But if not, then you're not really solving the problem in the long term. It's going to kind of be back where it was a few months down the road or so on. So we missed the opportunity to make a greater impact there. And kind of with that, and when I talk about mindset, when you're doing this work, kind of the thing to avoid is that sometimes there's a tendency to see ourselves as kind of sort of the savior who's coming in from the outside, and really, saving people from something that they can't overcome on their own, or they can't address on their own. And the problem is it's kind of a dynamic and a stereotype that we don't want to be reinforcing that unintentionally. We want to be breaking that and really upholding, the agency of people, and upholding their dignity and their ability, to address the issues that they face, because really, everyone is just as capable as us. So we really want to, in my opinion, honor that fact, and really focus solutions around local people, and really make it about them. Yeah. And then, kind of as a aside, sometimes the thing to really be careful of too is that I think most groups have, the vast majority of groups have good intentions and they want to help others, but there have been a few documented examples of individuals or actors that are actually abusing people's good intentions and actually intentionally causing harm because there's money involved in it. So there's been some cases of, orphanages, for example, that have been found to deliberately keep conditions worse to attract more outside money, or you have kids who are being put in orphanages by their parents when obviously, they need to be with their families. They should not be in an orphanage because it's a lot of psychological harm that can come from that. So we need to also be careful that we're not, supporting any bad actors like that. And sometimes that can happen if we're not careful.
Yeah, I think that's a really good transition into, talking about 33 buckets and, how your guys' sustainable model and how you strive to ensure that, the work that you are doing is sustainable. And so I'd love to just give a little bit of background into how we became connected. So give the viewers a little bit of background. In the early stages of our Peru program, which focuses on water resource management and sustainable practices. We've worked with a local elementary school and helping them implement their sustainability goals within their community. And at some point within that relationship, after years of building that trust and that strong relationship between TGP team and the local community, they came to us asking or addressing their worries about the water quality in their community and the health of the children at the school. And, as a program that is only improved for 4 times a year, we knew that we wanted to refer this community to an organization that would be able to provide that type of sustainable solution. So that's really where 33 Buckets came in. So Paul, maybe you want to take from there, where that relationship then went after you guys as 33 Buckets were able to connect with that local community and that elementary school in Peru.
Sure. So just kind of how we developed that project. Yeah. So I know at the time it was actually kind of a critical point for us because we had finished that project in Bangladesh and we didn't really know, we hadn't really connected to any opportunities to be able to work in the future. So it kind of provided the first opportunity we really had as a nonprofit organization, not just a student project. So I know one of our team members actually connected with you at a conference I think it was Philadelphia, was it? I think it was there.
Yeah, probably. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we connected with that. We learned about the situation. There was a school in this rural community called Vilcapata that's just outside of Cusco. And had issues with their water system where the water was unpurified, and a lot of the children who are the most vulnerable people to waterborne illness were getting sick from this water. And when that happens, it really, aside from the direct, obvious health risk, it's keeping kids out of school because they can't go if they're sick, and it's not good for their development. So we worked with the school and with another university that has a program in Cusco. And then let me think. I think it was the beginning of 2017 or 2016, excuse me. One of our co-founders made an assessment trip and basically went to the community, talked with the school principal and the leaders about, what their perception of the problem is, what they wanted to do to address it. And then from there, took water tests to see, of course, what are the specific contaminants that we're dealing with, because different technologies work on different contaminants. So there's not necessarily one filter that's going to work everywhere. So taking that, he found out, it's mainly, bacteria in the water. And kind of from that knowledge, he returned to the US and our team worked to develop, we found a filtration system that would work for that because it was a little bit different than our project in Bangladesh. So we connected with a company that supplied membrane filters. And from there, we designed the system using a filter and then a system of tanks to ensure that there wouldn't be a water shortage so that the school could, store enough water to get through the day. And then some of my teammates, I actually couldn't go on that specific trip, couldn't get away from work at the time. But the rest of my teammates traveled to Cusco in the summer of 2016. And from there, they worked with the community. So that's a very important part of our approach. We work with community groups. We work with local people to do construction work, things like that, that local people can help with, that they can do. And they built a filtration system, tank structure, and a building to house the filter and house water containers and so on. And I know from there they did they do other programs too. So WASH education. WASH stands for water, sanitation, and hygiene. So people are aware of how does water get contaminated? How does water make us sick? How do we ensure that purified water doesn't get recontaminated by, say, if we place it in a dirty container or uncovered container, things like that. So they held that program and set up a community management group to oversee and ensure that people know how to maintain the filter, what needs to be done to ensure that it, everything continues to work and doesn't break down. And then from there, it was implemented in mid-2016. And we actually went back 2017 and 2018 as well to revisit the site and, just ensure that everything's working, take a few water tests to be sure that, there's still no bacteria in there. And it was all successful. We found that, there's still no bacteria and, they're maintaining it as needed. So that was cool for us to see. That was exciting that, it's working as intended.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that I think you touched on a little bit of, your guys' model within just that first project in Peru. But can you just, I guess, give a little bit more of like a structure and how you guys ensure that, your work and your technologies and methodologies are sustainable within a community? Like, what are those steps that you usually take?
Right. So there's kind of three main aspects to our approach. So the first is what we call our community franchise model. So we really see, and we call it franchises because we really want to approach each project as though it's being run like a business. So it's taking in enough money to keep itself going, and ensure that there's no need for continued reinvestment to keep things going. Reinvestment from the outside. So kind of the way we do that is we start out by approaching a community. Approach it usually through another group that's already working there, or a local leader who reaches out to us. So, we're not just coming in and people don't know who we are. We're working with someone who's already trusted by people in the community. And we work with them to understand the need and to see, who's going to be the local water committee who's going to run this, who's willing to run it, and how can we collect the revenue needed to pay for maintenance and upkeep. So that's kind of the first part of what we do. The second part is what we call our 33 buckets toolbox. So that's basically just it's our design approach, basically what we call our design approach, where we have what we kind of envision as a toolbox of different technical solutions that can work, depending on, what kind of infrastructure is there. Does every home in the community have piped water, or not? Is there one point that people have to go to get water? And then, what are the contaminants that need to be removed from the water? So that's kind of the second part. And then the third is our water sanitation and hygiene education.
So it seems like is there that direct, like steps that you take to ensure that, the community is engaged and that they have that education as well as the tools to make it happen after you guys leave. So with that, experience in Peru, and I know we've talked a little bit about, you guys expanding to different communities within Peru. What goes into your decision making in, bringing 33 buckets to a certain community? Like, why are you choosing the places that you are? And maybe if you could tell us a little bit more about the types of stakeholders that you are talking to in different communities to really get, 33 buckets and this water franchise going?
Right. So the main two criteria we have, what really guides our decision is, first, is there really a need, or are we just kind of going in to go in somewhere? We want to make sure that there really is a concrete need that we're needed to address. Where we bring skills that the local community doesn't have, and those skills are needed to solve the problem. And then the second important thing to us is, and I touched on this kind of before, but that the community really wants to do it. That they're not necessarily everyone's aware, but at least there's a local leadership group who's aware of the problem and really wants to solve it, and is willing to put in the time and resources to really maintain a long-term solution. So we don't want to be the people who are coming in, saying, "Oh, hey, we're going to solve your problems," because that doesn't really, people. Because if you do that, people are kind of like, "What?" Like, well, okay, like you're doing this for free, so we don't really want to complain about it because you're helping us, but we don't really know why it's so important or how to keep this going. We want to not have that kind of situation. So the way we start out is really we approach a local group, local leaders. We talk with them about the problem. If there is an issue, we'll visit there. We'll do an assessment. Look at the infrastructure, test the water, and so on. Do some interviews, maybe of local people, to see what the perception is of the water. And then from there, we'll work on using our toolbox to find a solution that's both it works and can be maintained. Comes from local parts, local components, and so on. And then we'll hold a community meeting where we show us and the leaders will show the plan that's been devised and really get the community's feedback. And kind of the important part at this stage is that we have to get their approval to continue. So if the community, if we have a plan, if we have a preliminary plan, but the community isn't really interested or they don't really know, maybe they don't trust us. We haven't had that happen, but it could, for example, then we actually don't continue until that's been resolved. And that's very important to us. We have to be okay with saying, we're actually not going to do this project right now. And that can be hard as a nonprofit because you have donors, you have supporters who want they want to see impact, but we kind of to really make a sustainable impact, we kind of have to. That's a pressure we kind of have to resist and be sure that what we're doing is really wanted and needed.
Yeah, that's I think a really great point to make. To ensure that it's really that approval is coming from the community themselves, and to ensure that they're fully on board before really making any further movements. Because everything you said really makes sense. And I know that you guys are looking into other communities within Peru. So what are some of the impacts that you've seen in the projects that you've done so far, and where else are you looking to go?
So far, at the moment, like we really need to. We're wanting to get more. I should say we're having to wait for more long-term data because the oldest of our projects is still just 3.5 years old. The oldest project in Peru is 2 years old. So far with the impact we've seen, all of our projects are still working and providing safe water, which is exciting for us to see because the data shows that 40% of water projects 40% of water projects fail after a few years. So it's a good first sign, but we want to see them function for longer. And we also, at the moment, we need to work on one thing we need to do is work on a more comprehensive impact assessment program. So we're working with the university that we partnered with before to kind of design that and see so we can really get that data on, beyond just people have clean water, what's the measurable health impact of that? So I'd say it's something, exciting, but there's more work to be done for us.
Great, and I know that we're really excited to see what other work that you guys we'll be doing, and seeing what those long-term impacts will be in the next couple of years. So we are coming up to 1:30, and so we really took a lot of the time. I'm glad. I feel like we could continue to talk for another half an hour about this. But I guess we'll start closing out with some final thoughts and some Q&A as well. So Paul, did you have maybe any last minute advice that you would give to a traveler that is looking to have a positive impact in their travels when they go to a different country, or maybe something that you would tell a young professional looking to get into similar work as 33 Buckets?
Sure. I'd say I would put it in two categories mainly. So the first is kind of going back to kind of what we talked about at the beginning. Just have the right mindset around what you're doing. It's be sure that consider that the people that you're working with, they're not passive recipients of aid in general. There's a few exceptions, of course, but generally in anything you're going to be working on, you're working with people who live lives similar to ours and are just as capable as us. And really think long term also, like, is what I'm doing going to have a long-term impact? So that's kind of the first thing, just to keep in mind. I think like mindset really, it affects our actions, and it affects kind of how we make decisions, kind of going throughout our work efforts. So I think like things really start with that. And then the second thing I'd say is just, do your homework on, what you're doing, what the organization is you're working with. And just, take some time to learn about the issue that you're addressing. So you're going to build a house, overseas, learn a little bit about, where they're working and what, housing issues there are. And then just research more on the organization you're working with. So just things like, do they have a plan to ensure sustainable impact after they leave? What impact have they made? Are they utilizing local assets, or just kind of coming in from the outside? Do they have, either local management in their organization, or, do they hand off what they do to local organizations? Either one is, a good thing to ensure that the group you're working with has. So kind of like, it's kind of those two things for me, like the mindset and then just doing the research, and making sure that you're really, taking an appropriate approach, kind of going back to, not taking a short-term relief approach if it's really a long-term development project.
Great. And then was there maybe something some advice that you would give maybe another young engineer who's looking to, make the type of that 33 Buckets has?
Yeah, sorry, I just spaced on that part of the question.
No worries.
Yeah, I would say, there's so many things that I could say. So are you thinking more like along the lines of if someone wanted to start an organization like 33 Buckets or get involved?
Yeah, I think that, if from an entrepreneurial mindset, or, somebody that's just looking to get into a impact industry, and as like an engineer or as a young professional, and what are some, advice that you would have through your experience?
Yeah, I would say, and there's so many things. I would say really like stick with it is the first thing. Like have a lot of determination and understand that it's not going to happen overnight. If you're whether you're changing your career and looking to get in with an existing organization, or especially to start your own organization, there's a lot to learn, and you're almost never going to have everything go the way you think. To be a success. If you do, you should just go buy the Powerball ticket, because more luck than any of us. But just understand it's kind of it's usually going to be a windy road, and you're going to have to change course, and you're going to, get things wrong. 33 bucks we did so many times, as a student project, especially. So just recognizing that that's all part of the journey, and like don't give up or be discouraged. And just really have that vision of like what it is you want to do, with your career, with the organization you're starting, and really hold to that vision, and just understand, yeah, it takes a lot of work to make it happen, but you can make it happen. You don't have to be like Superman. It's always ordinary people really who just have that attitude and have that vision and stick with it through the ups and downs.
Yeah, ordinary people that do extraordinary things, not to be too corny. Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah, great. Well, I think now do we have a few questions from the audience? Yes. Great. Okay, Caitlin, can we hear the questions?
The first question we have is, how does 33 Buckets identify the communities that they want to work in while being abroad?
Did you hear that, Paul?
Yeah, so the question is, how do we identify the communities that we want to work with while abroad?
Yes.
So right now, most of that is through, historically, it's been through existing NGOs or groups that are already engaged with those communities. So to give you an example, a project that we're doing right now is in Trujillo, Peru. And there's a group called Hands On Peru that runs a health clinic in this community near Trujillo. And they reached out to us because they were aware of water contamination issues. And I don't remember exactly how they found out about us, but they found out about us and they reached out for our support to develop that partnership, because they had the knowledge of community health issues, because they're medical experts, but they didn't necessarily have the technical knowledge to devise a water filtration or sustainable water purification method. So we kind of built that partnership with them, and because they've worked with the community for quite a while, people in the community really trust them to have their best interests in mind. They know that group's they've been there for them. They're not going to just leave after things are done. They're not just there to take some photos and go home. So I think that makes a lot of difference, because you have that trust and buy-in that you wouldn't have just coming in. But actually, recently so I'll tell you about the most recent projects. That was a little more direct. So I actually reached out to one of the local municipalities around Cusco, so near the projects that we implemented this year. And they worked with local leaders of local water committees that are already there. And we set up some meetings where we just introduced ourselves, and they talked about what their water issues were, and then I talked about what 33 Buckets does. So that's one of the things I'm actually going to be doing when I go to Peru in a week, is going to actually visit their communities and learn more. So generally, I guess the common thread is we're starting to take a little more direct approach, but it's always going through people who've already been there and know more than we do about the specific issue.
Great. I think that's a great answer and pretty much encapsulate it. So is there anything else that we have?
Yes. Joseph, who's
Joseph
has a question. So I know you said that 32 Buckets often works for development regions rather than emergency aid. Can you elaborate on that?
Did you hear that?
I got parts of it. Would you mind repeating that?
Sure. Joseph had asked that you had mentioned that 33 Buckets focuses on the long-term development aspect of aid, but not necessarily emergency aid. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, he asked?
Yeah, so right now all of our projects are on long-term development, so it's not necessarily places that have just been hit by a hurricane or a flood or disaster like that, where there's a need there is a need for a short-term band-aid. That's the appropriate approach, and that's something we would like to do that eventually, but we recognize right now as a new growing organization, and with our capacity just isn't what say a Charity Water or a bigger organization is. So to be really great at what we're doing, we need to focus on one specific area of relief for development work, and really perfect our approach there. And then I think from there, we may eventually go into disaster relief. But we recognize, I think it's not necessarily our strong point. There's lots of other awesome organizations who are doing that. and really, we want to have whenever there's a need for, say, short-term relief, we want, the groups who are best at that to be doing that. So
Yeah.
Maybe eventually we'll get into that, but right now we want to focus on being really good at development.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I think we had 2 more questions.
Someone that was signed up for your talk has a question about defining impactful travel, and how does that differ from a student to a family to a professional? Does that differ even?
That's a good question. I'd have to maybe need a second to think about that.
Yeah. I think, is there another question as well? Can you repeat it one more time?
Yeah, so someone who had RSVP had a question about defining impactful travel, and how that experience might differ from a student to a family that wants to do something versus a professional who wants to have an impact.
Got it.
Okay, I would say there might be 2 things that differ that I can think of off the top of my head. The first might be just, what are the learning needs for people? So I think an important part of doing voluntourism or doing, any work like that overseas where you're making impact is, what you learn from it too. Excuse me. When you have a student versus, say, a family with kids or a professional, I could see, there might be different things they need to learn. So, taking kids overseas, maybe a parent might just want them to learn that, there's people who don't have maybe as much as them. And maybe they want to teach their kids, like, to give back to others. So, doing something like, projects, say, like painting a school might be a good thing to do there. So, kids can get involved. Or maybe if you have a professional and you have specific skills that you can bring. It was actually something I wanted to touch on and didn't quite get to it, but a really good thing to do is focus on, if you have unique skills that you bring to the table, can you use those in a way to solve a need that maybe local people haven't been able to because they don't have that specific skill. And then as a student, you might be somewhere in the middle where you may not have, developed as many skills yet because you just don't have quite as much experience. But you've learned, obviously, you've learned a little more than, say, a young kid would. So you might maybe be focused on getting more in the weeds and learning more about a specific issue that you're passionate about.
Yeah, I think that was a really good differentiator. And, there is that common theme of, wanting to make a positive impact. It's just how the tools to how to make it happen with, either who you are or, who you're bringing with you on that type of.
Yeah, it's kind of like on that, kind of like a continuum of, like, first, just learning about, that there are other needs, and then learning more about specific needs and what causes them, and then getting involved in solving the need with the community.
Great. Well, I think we have one more question.
The next one to wrap up the call with: what is the most rewarding part of working in this type of industry or with 33 Buckets?
That's good. I always love it. I think, like, really it's living, like, for one thing, just living according to my values, knowing that I'm helping people in need. I'm helping, people who are less fortunate than me through no fault of their own. And really, being someone who's, like, upholding their cause, I guess, when they might be people who don't have a voice normally. Really, like, I say, like, the coolest part, of course, is, being when you're on the ground, working with people, and you complete something, and then you're seeing, kids drinking clean water for the first time. That's always, it's a great feeling, definitely. Can't deny that. But yeah, it's kind of like, it's interesting because, like, there are also times, like, it's not quite as exciting. You're just doing sending emails and trying to get things set up, or doing, the housekeeping, like the accounting and things like that, and so That's actually like kind of an interesting part of doing it too, is like I have to, you know, remember why I'm doing it and like maintain that passion, even when it's something that's not as exciting as being on the ground.
Yeah, I think that goes back into that advice that you've given, you know, another young professional or, you know, a student looking to do something similar is to, you know, hold with your values and with the passion that started it out from the first place, and just to keep with it. Yeah. And then just to realize that it will always be rewarding in the end.
Yeah. I know. I think like it's kind of human nature. Like, you know, I'll think that like, oh, I'm going to, you know, I'm unhappy about something, but I'll be happier when I start this new job or whatever this new thing happens. You know, it's kind of human nature, I think, that we kind of see it that way. And then, you know, really it's, I don't know, it's like really cheesy to say like find it within yourself, but it's kind of, I think like really it comes down to, yeah, living like how you like according to your values, I guess. And yeah, being someone who's, you know, thinking outside yourself, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a great way to wrap up. And thank you to everyone who has joined us for this talk. And you too, Paul, thanks so much for joining us and taking some time out of your day. And before you yourself end up going on your trip to Peru back to consider, you know, continue your work. And we hope that, you know, everyone that got to listen, you know, is thinking about impactful travel in a little bit of a different way. And if you are looking for your next adventure and impactful travel experience, TGP is currently enrolling in our like winter, spring, and summer programs for 2019. So you can find more information in the description below, as well as on our website at thegreenprogram.com. And if you like this talk and talking with Paul, then please feel free to join us for our next talk next week on October 30th, where we'll be talking about sustainability in academia and beyond. So Paul, do you have any last minute thoughts, or are you ready to sign off?
I don't know. I guess if you have any other questions, you can reach out to me too, Paul at 33buckets.org. You can always send more questions to me if you have any questions about 33 buckets, and I'd be happy to answer them.
Great. I think that's awesome. I'm sure that you'll get a few emails very soon. And, you know, everyone that's listening, we'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.
Great. Have a good day.